Trilogy of Horror Part 3.
When a group of friends venture into the eerie depths of Thetford Forest, they capture something unimaginable on camera, a glimpse of a strange, elusive creature. But when they return home, their lives take a terrifying turn. One by one, they begin to disappear, vanishing without a trace. Haunted by the memories of the forest and the creature they encountered, the remaining friends must confront their darkest fears. As they come face to face with the unknown, a chilling question emerges. Could this sinister being be the legendary Wendigo? The late afternoon sun dappled through the thick canopy of Thetford Forest, casting a warm, golden hue over the sprawling woods. Emma and James, a couple from the nearby town of Brandon, were enjoying a leisurely walk with their spirited spaniel, Max. They often came to the forest to escape the bustle of everyday life, finding solace in its serene beauty. Lost in conversation and laughter, they barely noticed the sun dipping below the horizon. The forest, a familiar haven in daylight, began to transform as shadows lengthened and an eerie stillness settled in. Max, usually energetic and curious, started to whine and stick close to their heels. "It's getting late. We should head back," Emma said, a hint of unease in her voice. She glanced at her watch and was surprised to see it was much later than she had thought. As they turned to retrace their steps, a sudden rustling from the underbrush startled them. Max barked furiously, his hackles raised. James squinted into the trees, trying to discern the cause of the disturbance. That's when he saw it, a fleeting glimpse of a figure, too tall and too strange to be human, vanishing behind a thick cluster of trees. It had the unmistakable silhouette of a man, but with the head and antlers of a deer. "Did you see that?" he whispered to Emma, his voice laced with disbelief. Before she could answer, another rustle echoed through the forest, closer this time. They could feel the presence of something watching, something ancient and unfathomable. Panic surged through them as they realized they were not alone. "Let's get out of here," Emma said, her voice trembling. They quickened their pace, every snap twig and whisper of wind amplifying their fear. Max barked incessantly, as if urging them to hurry. The forest seemed endless, and for a terrifying moment, they feared they had lost their way. But eventually, the familiar path emerged, leading them to the safety of their car. They didn't stop to catch their breath until they were well on their way home, the forest a dark silhouette in the rearview mirror. The next day, still shaken, they shared their experience with a local reporter. Their tale, tinged with the unbelievable but sincere in its fear, made the front page of the local newspaper and was shared extensively online. The headline read, "Mysterious creature spotted in Thetford Forest. A legend returns." The story reignited interest in the old legend of the forest, drawing both skeptics and believers into a debate that would soon captivate the entire region. The story of Emma and James's encounter in Thetford Forest spread like wildfire, igniting a mixture of skepticism and fascination among the locals. Among them were three friends, Alex, Mia, and Ben, known for their love of adventure and their small YouTube channel dedicated to exploring urban legends. Seeing an opportunity to make a name for themselves, they decided to investigate the forest. Armed with cameras, night vision goggles, and an unshakable sense of excitement, they ventured into the dense woods as dusk fell. The exact spot where the creature was reportedly seen became their base. They set up cameras in strategic locations, hoping to capture undeniable proof of the creature's existence. The night in the forest was an eerie experience. The usual sounds of the wilderness were amplified in the darkness, making every rustle and snap sound ominous. Several times, they thought they saw shadows moving in the distance, but it turned out to be nothing more than the wind stirring the trees. Hours passed without any significant incident, and a sense of disappointment began to settle in. As dawn approached, they decided to pack up, feeling a mix of exhaustion and disillusionment. They had hoped for a clear sighting, a definitive proof, but the forest remained a silent, impenetrable mystery. Back at Alex's house, they reviewed the footage from the cameras. Most of it showed the quiet forest at night, nothing more. But then, on one of the cameras, they saw something that made their hearts race. It was a grainy and out-of-focus image, but there was a distinct figure resembling the creature, with antlers silhouetted against the night. Their excitement was palpable. This was it, their moment of glory, their ticket to fame. They hastily prepared the footage and took it to the local newspaper, confident that they were about to make headlines. The newspaper editor, a seasoned journalist named Mr. Thompson, examined the footage with a critical eye. After a long pause, he looked up, his expression one of skepticism. "This could be anything," he said dismissively. "It's too grainy, too out of focus. For all we know, this could be someone wearing a mask, a prank. I can't publish this as evidence of a mythical creature." The trio's spirits plummeted. They had been so sure of their success, only to have their hopes dashed by the blunt assessment of the editor. The realization hit them hard. Capturing proof of the unknown was not going to be as easy as they had thought. But as they left the newspaper office, a new determination settled among them. They would return to the forest, better prepared this time to uncover the truth, no matter how elusive it might be. After the deflating visit to the newspaper office, Alex, Mia, and Ben returned to their respective homes, each nursing a sense of disappointment and frustration. Alex slumped onto his sofa, feeling particularly disheartened. He switched on his Xbox, trying to distract himself with video games. But as he played, something strange began to happen. In the game, he couldn't shake the feeling that some of the characters bore an uncanny resemblance to the figure they had captured on camera in Thetford Forest. He tried to dismiss it as his imagination, fueled by the day's events, but the nagging thought persisted. Switching off the console in annoyance, Alex decided to watch a movie instead, hoping to clear his mind. However, the same eerie sensation followed him. Throughout the movie, he kept seeing figures that reminded him of the creature, fleeting shadows in the background that seemed to mirror the antlered silhouette. This was more than a coincidence. It felt like a message, an invitation. Suddenly, Alex felt an irresistible urge to return to the forest. It was as if a magnetic pull, inexplicable and unyielding, was drawing him there. Without a second thought, he grabbed his coat and headed out, leaving his front door wide open in his haste. The next day, Maya and Ben tried to contact Alex but received no response. Concerned, they drove to his house, only to find his car missing and the front door ajar. A quick search of the house revealed nothing. It was as if Alex had left in a hurry. After 3 anxious days with no word from Alex, they reported him missing to the police. The authorities initiated a search and soon found Alex's car parked at Thetford Forest. The doors open, but no sign of Alex. The vehicle looked abandoned, as if he had left in a hurry or been taken abruptly. The news of Alex's disappearance spread quickly, reigniting the mysterious aura surrounding Thetford Forest. As the police combed the area, Mia and Ben grappled with guilt and fear, wondering if their quest for fame had led their friend into peril. The forest, once a place of wonder and intrigue, now loomed as a sinister enigma, hiding secrets that perhaps were never meant to be uncovered. Mia, overwhelmed by the disappearance of her friend Alex, retreated into the confines of her flat. She sought solace in solitude, a bottle of wine her only companion, as she tried to drown the growing sense of dread. Soft, relaxing music played in the background, a stark contrast to the turmoil in her mind. As she sat there, lost in thought, a sudden movement outside her window caught her eye. For a brief second, she thought she saw antlers passing by. Her heart raced. It couldn't be. She was in the middle of the city. She shook her head, attributing it to the wine and her stressed state of mind. But then, the music changed. The soothing melodies were replaced by sounds that chilled her to the bone, the clashing of antlers, as if two deer were locked in combat. Mia sat up, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. "What's going on?" she muttered to herself, feeling an eerie sense of being watched. The strange occurrences didn't stop there. Her lights flickered without reason, and the temperature in the room dropped suddenly, leaving her breath visible in the air. She heard whispers, indistinct yet unmistakably human, emanating from the corners of her flat. Each bizarre event further frayed her nerves, heightening her sense of unease. Then, just as it had with Alex, an irresistible urge overtook her, a compelling, powerful pull towards Thetford Forest. It was an inexplicable longing, a call that resonated with something deep within her. Resistance seemed futile. The desire to go to the forest consumed her every thought. In a trance-like state, Mia left her flat. She didn't bother to close the door or take her belongings. The need to go to the forest was all-encompassing, drowning out any sense of reason or fear. Mia's journey to Thetford Forest remained shrouded in mystery. Her friends and family searched for her. The police launched an extensive investigation, but no trace of her was ever found. Like Alex, she had vanished without a trace, swallowed by the enigmatic depths of the forest. Her disappearance added another layer to the growing legend of the forest and its mysterious creature. The once peaceful woodland now stood as a symbol of unexplained phenomena, a place where the boundary between myth and reality was perilously thin. The stories of those who were drawn to the forest and never returned continued to haunt the local community, a chilling reminder of the mysteries that lie hidden in the shadows of Thetford Forest. Ben, the last of the trio, found himself grappling with the unsettling disappearances of his friends. He approached the police, desperate for answers, but their insights only deepened the mystery. According to the authorities, both Alex and Mia had left their homes as if in a trance, abandoning everything behind them. This detail echoed the stories of the creature they had been chasing, adding a chilling layer to the unfolding events. Determined to uncover the truth, Ben turned to the internet for research. Time and again, his searches led him to a single, haunting entity, the Wendigo. Traditionally, this creature was associated with the folklore of Algonquian-speaking peoples in North America, not England. The Wendigo was said to be a malevolent, cannibalistic spirit that could possess humans, especially those guilty of taboo activities like cannibalism. But why would a Wendigo be in Thetford Forest, thousands of miles from its cultural origins? Ben delved deeper into the myth and discovered a possible link. Centuries ago, during periods of colonization and exploration, cultural exchanges between different parts of the world were not uncommon. It was conceivable that settlers or explorers from North America brought the Wendigo myth to England, where it merged with local folklore, possibly explaining the creature resembling a man with a deer's head and antlers. The more Ben read, the more he realized the possible connection between their pursuit of the creature and the disappearances of Alex and Mia. According to legend, the Wendigo was not just a predator, but also a trickster, capable of luring its victims through mimicry and illusions. Perhaps by attempting to capture its image, They had unknowingly marked themselves as targets, drawing the Wendigo's attention. Fearful that he might be next, Ben took extreme measures. He remembered reading that Wendigos could influence the minds of their victims, compelling them to wander into the wilderness. To prevent himself from succumbing to a similar fate, Ben decided to tie himself to his bed each night. He hoped this physical restraint would prevent any unconscious, compelled journey towards the forest and the waiting Wendigo. Night after night, Ben lay in his bed, bound by ropes, his mind racing with fear and questions. The silence of his room was a stark contrast to the howling winds outside, a reminder of the unseen horrors that might be lurking in the darkness. As he drifted into a restless sleep, he couldn't shake the feeling that the Wendigo was out there somewhere, waiting for its next victim to surrender to its call. As night enveloped the world outside, Ben lay in his bed, his legs securely tied to the bedpost. The rope was his lifeline, a safeguard against the inexplicable pull towards Thetford Forest. He had hoped the bindings would grant him peace, but instead, a relentless, overwhelming urge gripped him. It was an instinctual, primal call, stronger than any he had ever experienced, driving him towards the forest. With a desperate intensity, Ben struggled against the cord, his rational mind losing ground to the compelling force. He reached the edge of his room, but the rope held him back. In a frenzy, he clawed at the floor, tears streaming down his face, his throat emitting involuntary howls. The struggle was futile. The rope was unyielding, his physical strength no match for the cord that anchored him to reality. Exhausted and defeated, Ben collapsed on the floor. His fingers were raw and bleeding from scratching at the wooden planks, his knees bruised and aching, but he was safe, at least for the moment. Then, as he lay there, panting and disoriented, he turned his gaze to the window. There, in the moonlight, stood the creature, its form silhouetted against the night sky. The antlers, the stature, the very essence of the entity they had sought was there, staring into his room. Its breath was heavy, reminiscent of a stag preparing for a fight, its head lowering as if in a pre-attack posture. The creature's eyes, dark and piercing, locked onto Ben's. Frozen with terror, Ben screamed. The sound seemed to break the spell, and in an instant, the creature vanished, as if it had never been there. Left in a state of shock, Ben huddled in the corner of his room, waiting for dawn, too afraid to move, too afraid to sleep. As morning light filtered through the curtains, Ben's fear gradually gave way to determination. He knew what he had to do. He would go to Thetford Forest in the daylight. Perhaps in the safety of the sun, he could uncover some answers, find some clue as to what had happened to his friends, and understand the nature of the creature that haunted them. With a plan in mind, Ben untied himself, treated his wounds, and prepared for the journey. He armed himself with a camera, a map, and a resolve to face the unknown. As he stepped out of his house, the morning sun casting long shadows on the ground, Ben knew he was walking into the heart of the mystery that had consumed their lives. Whether he would find answers or succumb to the same fate as his friends remained to be seen, but he was determined to confront whatever lay hidden in the depths of Thetford Forest, and stepped into the heart of Thetford Forest with a mixture of fear and resolve. The area was eerily quiet, the only sound being the crunch of leaves under his feet. He made his way to the site where they had captured the image of the creature, his eyes scanning the forest around him. "What do you want?" he shouted into the trees, his voice echoing through the stillness. He half expected no answer, but what happened next was beyond his wildest fears. A rustle in the underbrush caught his attention, and he turned to see a deer standing there, its eyes fixed on him. Another deer joined it, and then another, until a group of deer all stood in a semicircle around him, their gaze unblinking, unnaturally still. Ben's heart pounded in his chest. This was not normal behavior for deer. Something else was at play. Then, from behind the group of deer, a massive stag emerged. It was a magnificent creature with terrifyingly large antlers. It locked eyes with Ben and began to slam its hooves into the dirt, snorting loudly through its nostrils. Ben's instinct screamed for him to run, but he knew that if he turned his back, the stag, or whatever it was, would easily catch him. Frozen in place, Ben watched in horror as the stag began to change. It reared up on its hind legs, its form twisting and morphing. Before his eyes, the stag transformed into the creature they had been seeking, the man with the head of a deer and massive antlers. At that moment, a couple walking their dog in a distant part of the forest heard a blood-curdling scream. It was a sound so filled with terror and despair that it would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Ben was never seen again. His disappearance added another tragic chapter to the legend of Thetford Forest. The creature, the man-deer, became a tale whispered in hushed tones, a warning of the unexplainable and unknown dangers lurking in the shadows of the forest. The mystery of what truly happened to Ben, Alex and Mia remained unsolved, leaving a lingering sense of unease and fear among the locals. Thetford Forest, with its deep woods and ancient secrets, continued to be a place of both fascination and dread, a reminder that some mysteries are perhaps best left unexplored. In the aftermath of the disappearances in Thetford Forest, a heavy shroud of mystery and fear hung over the local community. The legend of the creature, now widely associated with the Wendigo, became a topic of hushed, anxious discussion. But why did this entity take the lives of those who sought its secrets? The answer lay deep within the ancient lore and the very nature of the Wendigo itself. The Wendigo, as understood in the original Algonquian folklore, was not just a creature of physical threat. It was a spiritual entity, a guardian of the natural world and its sacred mysteries. It was believed that the Wendigo protected certain places and knowledge that were not meant for human understanding or interference. These were secrets deeply intertwined with the fabric of the natural world, holding powers and truths beyond human comprehension. When Alex, Mia and Ben attempted to capture the image of the creature and unveil its mystery to the world, they unknowingly crossed a forbidden threshold. They pried into secrets that were guarded by the Wendigo, challenging the balance that the entity was bound to protect. The forest, a place of ancient magic and untold stories, was under the Wendigo's watch, and it had its own way of maintaining the sanctity of its hidden truths. The manifestation of the Wendigo in Thetford Forest, far from its cultural origins, suggested that such entities were not bound by geography, but by purpose. They were the protectors of the unseen and the unknown, existing wherever the balance between the natural world and its deepest secrets was threatened. The Wendigo's actions were not acts of malice, but of necessity, dictated by the ancient laws that governed it. By taking the lives of those who sought to expose its secrets, the Wendigo was not only protecting the sanctity of the unknown, but also serving as a warning to others. It was a reminder that some mysteries are intrinsic to the natural world, and that the pursuit of these forbidden truths could have dire consequences. In the end, the legend of the Wendigo in Thetford Forest became a tale of caution, a somber narrative about the boundaries between the known and the unknown, and the price of transgressing those boundaries. The forest remained a place of awe and mystery, a reminder of the enduring power and secrets of the natural world and the ancient guardians who protect them. In the shadows of a fractured life, where sorrow breeds in the heart of a young girl, Emily, a chilling tale unfolds. After her parents split, she moves to an old house, shrouded in mystery, a haven for a dark entity. School becomes a battleground, bullies her tormentors, but at home, in the eerie silence, she finds an unexpected companion, the entity, thriving on her fear and sorrow. As Emily's world spirals into darkness, the line between victim and predator blurs. Her pain feeds the entity, their bond growing stronger, more sinister. Lost in the grip of an unrelenting darkness, Emily faces a harrowing choice: to break free or be consumed entirely. This is a tale of fear, sorrow, and the unseen shadows that linger in our lives. Welcome to the haunting story of Emily and the Darkness. Emily watched through the car window as the familiar sights of her old neighborhood faded into the distance. Her mother, Sarah, drove in silence, the tension in the car almost palpable. The only sound was the rhythmic wiper blades, sweeping away the persistent drizzle that seemed to mourn their departure. They pulled up in front of a Victorian-era house that stood at the end of a cobblestone street. It was imposing, with its aged, darkened brickwork and towering gables. The for sale sign in the yard swayed slightly in the breeze, as if waving goodbye to its previous occupants. "Here we are, Emily, our new home," Sarah announced, attempting a cheerful tone. The house, while majestic, had an air of neglect. Vines crept up its sides, and the once vibrant garden was now overgrown. Emily hesitated, feeling a strange unease as she stepped inside. The house was spacious, with high ceilings and large windows, but it was shrouded in shadows, giving it a gloomy atmosphere. The following day at school, Emily's apprehension grew. She felt like an outsider in the bustling hallways of Westfield High. Whispers and pointing fingers followed her as she navigated through the crowd. In her first class, a group of girls snickered as she walked in, their eyes scrutinizing her thrift store clothes and unkempt hair. "Looks like we have a charity case," one of them whispered loudly enough for Emily to hear, setting off a round of muffled giggles. Emily's cheeks burned with humiliation, but she kept her head down, trying to ignore them. Lunchtime was no better. Emily sat alone, picking at her food, while the same group of girls sat nearby, casting occasional glances her way and whispering among themselves. She felt their eyes on her, judgmental and cruel. That night, as Emily tried to find comfort in her new room, the house's eerie quietude was unsettling. The creaks and groans of the old structure sounded like hushed conversations in a language she couldn't understand. She tossed and turned, her mind replaying the day's events. The laughter of her classmates echoed in her ears, blending with the strange sounds of the house. Around midnight, Emily was jolted awake by a loud thump from somewhere above her. She sat up, heart racing, listening intently. It was followed by a series of soft scratches, like nails on wood. Her imagination conjured images of unseen creatures lurking in the dark corners of the house. She lay back down, pulling the covers up to her chin, trying to convince herself it was just the house settling. But as she drifted back to sleep, a chilling thought crept into her mind. What if the house wasn't just settling? What if it was trying to communicate something to her? Sleep eventually came, but it was restless, filled with dreams of shadowy figures and whispered threats. Emily woke the next morning, feeling more exhausted than when she had gone to bed, a sense of foreboding lingering in her mind. Ah, my dear nocturnal scholars of the macabre. It's time for a quick scare break. As we linger in these shadowy realms, a small favour I dare to ask. If my tales of terror bring you thrills, do not let our journey end here. Hit like, subscribe, and join our dark congregation. Now shall we delve deeper into the abyss. Let's embrace the darkness once more. Let's get back to the shadows. The morning sun filtered weakly through the curtains of Emily's room, casting long shadows across the floor. She sat at the edge of her bed, her thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and sadness. She felt lost in this new, alien world, both at home and at school. At breakfast, Emily's mother noticed her downcast eyes and the way she listlessly pushed her cereal around the bowl. "What's on your mind, Em?" Sarah asked gently, sitting across from her. Emily sighed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why is life so hard, Mum? I try to say the right things, make the right choices, but everything just seems to go wrong." Sarah reached across the table, taking her daughter's hands in hers. "Life is a journey, Emily. You're at a point where your body and your brain are changing. You're transitioning from a child to an adult, and it's not an easy process." Emily looked up, her eyes filled with questions. "Your brain is literally being rebuilt. Think of it like a construction site," Sarah continued. "A part of your brain is having a tough time with impulse control and decision-making. It's normal to feel overwhelmed and make mistakes during this phase. But it feels like I'm just messing everything up," Emily murmured. Sarah smiled reassuringly. "It's a phase, sweetie. It will get better. You're growing, learning. These struggles are part of becoming who you're meant to be." Feeling a bit more comforted, Emily headed to school, clutching her mother's words like a lifeline. However, the day quickly soured. In the hallway, a girl from the group that had been tormenting her approached with a malicious grin. Before Emily could react, her backpack was snatched away, and a stinging slap landed across her face. Tears welled in her eyes as laughter echoed around her. Humiliated and in pain, Emily returned home that afternoon, feeling more alone than ever. She retreated to her room, lying on her bed as the evening light faded to darkness. As she lay there, the house began its nightly chorus of creaks and groans. But tonight, there was something different. Amidst the familiar sounds, Emily heard a faint voice, a sinister whisper that seemed to come from the very walls of the room. "I like the taste of your sorrow," it murmured, the words slithering through the darkness like a snake. Emily's heart pounded in her chest. She sat up, looking around her dimly lit room, but saw nothing. The voice was gone as quickly as it had appeared, leaving her to wonder if she had imagined it. But the seed of fear had been planted. As she lay back down, her mind raced with questions. What was that voice? Where did it come from? And most importantly, what did it want with her? The days that followed were a blur of torment for Emily. The girls at school, emboldened by their unchecked cruelty, made her life unbearable. Each day was a gauntlet of insults, pranks, and physical intimidation. Emily felt trapped in a never-ending nightmare, both at school and in the solitude of her home. One night, as Emily lay in bed, her thoughts a whirlpool of despair, she felt an inexplicable weight pressed down on her legs. Her heart skipped a beat as she looked up to see a dark, cloaked figure at the foot of her bed. Its form was indistinct, as if made of shadows, but its presence was oppressively real. "I like your sorrow. It tastes so sweet," the figure whispered, in a voice that was both enticing and terrifying. "Who are you?" Emily screamed, terror constricting her throat. At her scream, the bedroom door flew open, and Sarah rushed in, flicking on the light. The figure vanished like smoke, leaving Emily alone with her frightened mother. "Emily, what's wrong?" Sarah asked, her voice laced with concern as she sat beside her on the bed. "I saw something. A figure." Emily's voice trembled as she tried to explain. Sarah hugged her tightly. "It's okay. You're safe now. Remember, your body and mind are going through so many changes. Your hormones are fluctuating, and it's causing spikes in cortisol levels. This stress hormone can cloud your judgment and make everything feel more intense and frightening." Emily nodded, but the fear in her heart didn't subside. She felt something sinister lurking in the shadows of her room, waiting for the lights to go out. The next day was a haze. Emily moved through her school routine mechanically, her mind haunted by the image of the shadowy figure. That night, as she lay in bed, the darkness seemed to thicken and the air grew cold. The entity appeared again, more distinct this time. It hovered over her, its form a swirling mass of darkness. "Your fear feeds me, Emily. Your sorrow makes me strong," it hissed, its voice a chilling melody that played on her deepest fears. Emily lay frozen, terror gripping her like a vice. The entity seemed to grow larger, feeding off her fear and sorrow. Its presence filled the room, suffocating and all-encompassing. She wanted to scream, to call out for her mother, but fear had stolen her voice. Tears streamed down her face as she realized she was facing something beyond her understanding, something that thrived on her misery. The entity's whispers continued, a litany of dark promises and sinister comforts. Emily felt the weight of its gaze, cold and unyielding. She knew then that this was no figment of her imagination. This was real, and it was feeding on her darkest emotions. As the night wore on, the entity's presence lingered, a dark guardian watching over her. Emily lay there, too scared to sleep, too terrified to move, wondering how she could ever escape the grasp of this malevolent shadow. The day had been particularly brutal for Emily. The relentless bullying at school had escalated, leaving her emotionally battered. With no friends to turn to, she felt utterly isolated. By the time she reached home, her spirit was crushed, and her heart was heavy with an unspeakable sadness. As she lay in her bed that night, tears streaming down her cheeks, the familiar, ominous presence made itself known. The entity emerged from the shadows, its form more defined than ever, thriving on her despair. "Oh, hello again," Emily said, her voice empty of the fear that once trembled in it. "At least I can rely on you to show up for me." The entity seemed to smile, a disturbing shift in its shadowy form. "I love your sorrow," it whispered, its voice a dark caress. "Yes, my sorrow," Emily replied, her voice laced with a bitter resignation. "I have it all day, all night, everywhere I go. My life sucks, but at least I got you." The entity paused, a flicker of confusion passing through its dark mist. It was unaccustomed to such acceptance, its existence fueled by fear and terror, not this resigned acknowledgement. In the days that followed, Emily's fear of the entity gradually dissipated. Her life was so permeated with fear and sorrow that the presence of the entity became just another part of her grim reality. It was no longer a source of terror, but a constant in her world of chaos and pain. The entity, puzzled by this change, continued to visit Emily. However, the dynamic had shifted. It was no longer the predator looming over its prey. Instead, it became something akin to a dark, twisted companion in her loneliness. Emily's interactions with the entity took on a new tone. She spoke to it about her day, her bullies, her longing for a friend. The entity listened, its form hovering in the darkness, absorbing her words, her sorrow. But as the days passed, something unexpected happened. Emily's constant exposure to the entity, her acceptance of it as part of her life, began to diminish its power. The entity, once a formidable presence, started to appear less substantial, its form flickering like a shadow under a clouded moon. Emily's transformation was subtle. Her fear, once a palpable thing that consumed her, began to recede. In facing the entity night after night, in accepting its presence as a part of her sorrowful existence, she had inadvertently begun to rob it of its power over her. In this strange, dark companionship, Emily found a bizarre form of strength. The entity, once a symbol of her deepest fears, had become a testament to her resilience, a dark reminder of her ability to endure even in the face of despair. In the quiet of her room, Emily sat on her bed, the entity beside her, a faded form, its once intimidating presence now diminished. She looked at it, an idea forming in her mind. Well, as you need fear, what if I were to tell you where these girls live? The ones who bully me. Maybe you could go scare their pants off instead, Emily suggested, a hint of mischief in her voice. The entity seemed to ponder this, its form wavering like a wisp of smoke. Then it uttered one word: fear. Oh, I think you'll get a lot of fear from them, Emily said, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. Though they are bullies to me. My mom often says that bullies act out because they're having a hard time too, maybe at home or with other things. The next day at school, Emily walked down the hallway, her steps light, a sense of anticipation in the air. As she passed one of the girls who usually tormented her, she noticed a change. The girl looked haggard, with dark circles under her eyes, as if she hadn't slept. Another girl approached her, concern etched on her face. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Oh, nothing," the bully muttered, her voice barely audible, her eyes darting around nervously. Back in her room that evening, Emily found the entity more solid than it had ever been. Its form was clearer, more defined, as if it had been revitalized. Emily couldn't help but smile. "So, it was you," she said, a sense of satisfaction in her voice. The entity responded with a single word: fear. In that moment, Emily realized the power dynamic had shifted. The entity, once a harbinger of her own fears, had become an instrument of her will, a shadowy ally against those who had made her life miserable. For the first time, Emily felt a sense of control, a glimmer of empowerment in her otherwise bleak world. Yet, as she looked at the entity, its form stronger and more present than ever, a flicker of doubt crept into her mind. Was she using the entity, or was it using her? The line between empowerment and moral compromise blurred, leaving Emily to ponder the consequences of her newfound power. The entity, with its one-word utterances, remained an enigma, its intentions unclear, but for now, it was a companion in her quest for retribution, a dark echo of her own pain and resilience. Emily walked into school the next day with a newfound sense of confidence, her encounter with the entity still fresh in her mind. She felt different, stronger somehow, as if she were no longer the victim in her own story. As she navigated the crowded hallways, the main bully cornered her, pinning her against the wall with a menacing glare. "What you got for me today?" the bully sneered, expecting Emily to cower as usual. Instead, Emily met her gaze with a calm, almost eerie smile. "What would you like?" "I have a lot to offer," she replied, her voice steady. Confused and thrown off by Emily's unexpected demeanor, the bully released her grip and shoved Emily to the floor, muttering, "Weirdo." Emily looked up, her smile unwavering. There was a new power in her, a secret edge that the bully couldn't comprehend. Back at home, Emily sat in her room, conversing with the now familiar entity. "This one seems to have a lot of issues. Pain, sorrow, fear. I think she'll be perfect for you," Emily said, a hint of darkness in her tone. The entity turned to her, its form more substantial than before, and whispered, "Fear." Emily's smile broadened. She was no longer a mere observer in her life. She was a participant, shaping her own narrative. A few days later, Emily noticed the bully again. The girl who once exuded confidence and cruelty now looked haggard, as if she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes were hollow, her movements sluggish, a shell of her former self. As Emily passed by, she whispered under her breath, "Sorrow." No one heard her, but the word hung in the air like a dark promise. In the weeks that followed, Emily began to thrive at school. She made friends, her grades improved, and she found joy in small, everyday moments. The entity visited her often, each encounter strengthening her resolve and her sense of control over her life. Her home life, too, seemed to be on the upswing. Her relationship with her mother grew stronger, and the house, once a place of fear and an uncertainty, now felt like a sanctuary. But as Emily lay in bed each night, listening to the whispers of the entity, she couldn't shake the feeling that this newfound peace came at a price. The shadow that had once haunted her now empowered her, and she wondered what that meant for her soul. The lines between right and wrong, justice and revenge, were blurred in the shadow of the entity. Emily had found a way to cope with her pain, but the question remained, at what cost? Emily sat at the breakfast table with her mother, the morning light casting a warm glow across the room. For the first time in a long while, there was a genuine sense of happiness in her voice. "Mom, things are going so well in school now. I've been making friends and feeling so alive," Emily shared, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "That's wonderful, Emily," her mother exclaimed, relief evident in her tone. "Tell me about your friends." Emily began eagerly. "There's Jo, my first friend. She's really nice, but she's always sad. Her family is super strict, and they discipline her like in the old days. Whenever I'm with her, I can almost feel her sorrow." She then moved on to another friend. "And there's Sarah. Her parents also split up, but they're always arguing. She brings all that pain to school with her." As Emily spoke, a sudden realization dawned on her. Her words trailed off, and she fell silent, her expression turning introspective. She thought about the entity, how it fed on her fear and sorrow, and then she thought about her friends, about how their pain and sadness seemed to invigorate her, giving her a sense of strength and control. A chilling thought crept into her mind. Was she becoming like the entity, feeding off the pain and sorrow of others? The thought was unsettling, casting a shadow over her newfound happiness. She looked up at her mother, who was watching her with a concerned expression. "Emily, is everything okay?" her mother asked. "Yeah, Mum, everything's fine," Emily replied, forcing a smile. But inside, a turmoil of emotions was brewing. She was no longer sure if the positive changes in her life were the result of her own growth, or if they were fueled by something darker, something she had not intended. The revelation that she might be mirroring the entity's behavior was alarming. It raised questions about the nature of her recent transformation. Was she unwittingly absorbing the negative emotions of others, just as the entity absorbed hers? As Emily left for school that day, her mind was a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. She began to observe her interactions with her friends more closely, trying to understand the nature of the connection she felt with them. The joy of making friends was now tinged with the fear that she might be using their pain for her own gain, just as the entity had used hers. This realization marked a turning point for Emily. She knew she had to confront the truth about herself and the entity that lingered in the shadows of her life. The journey ahead was uncertain, but she understood that it was necessary to untangle the complex web of emotions and influences that had come to define her existence. Emily met her friends at school, but their conversations were no longer a source of comfort. As they shared their nightly pains and sadness, Emily felt a surge of strength and vigor coursing through her. The realization struck her like a lightning bolt. She was feeding on their sorrow, just as the entity fed on hers. She rushed home, her heart pounding, her mind racing with fear and confusion. Her mother was still at work, leaving the house eerily silent. Bursting into her room, Emily confronted the empty air. "What have you done to me?" The entity materialized, more solid and menacing than ever. "Sorrow," it whispered, its voice echoing the depth of Emily's realization. In that moment, the entity fully engulfed Emily. It had been feeding on her sorrow, growing stronger with each passing day. But now, it wasn't just feeding on her, it was merging with her. Emily had become a conduit for the entity, her own sorrow amplified by the sorrows of her friends. She had become an integral part of the entity, a vessel for its dark hunger. Emily was never seen again. Her disappearance sent shockwaves through the community. The police searched tirelessly, but no trace of her was found. Her mother was left in a state of inconsolable despair, and the school held a vigil in her memory. Rumors and theories abounded, but the truth remained a mystery. Time passed, and eventually, a new family moved into the house. A young boy, an only child, found himself struggling to adjust to the new environment, missing his old friends and life. One night, as he lay in bed, tears streaming down his face, he felt an inexplicable weight on his legs. Trembling, he looked up and saw a ghostly figure, the image of a young girl, translucent and sorrowful. It was Emily, lost in the grip of the entity, now a part of its haunting legacy. "Sorrow," she whispered, her voice a chilling echo of the entity's call. The boy lay frozen, staring at the spectral figure, as the room filled with a cold, mournful air. The house, with its dark history, had claimed another soul, binding Emily to its walls, her story becoming part of its eerie tapestry. In the haunting whisper of sorrow, the cycle continued, a reminder of the pain and fear that had consumed Emily. Her presence, now merged with the entity, lingered in the house, a ghostly testament to the cost of unaddressed pain and the dark power of sorrow. The rain drummed steadily against the windows of Claire's modest suburban home. She sat curled on the couch, clutching a steaming mug of tea, her hands trembling slightly as she stared into the amber liquid. Across from her, her husband Mark leaned forward in his chair, his brows knitted in concern. "I still can't believe she's gone," Claire said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her auburn hair fell in loose strands around her face, damp from the tears she'd been quietly shedding all evening. "It feels like the end of an era, like something's been torn out of my life." Mark reached out, his calloused hand resting gently on hers. "I know, Claire. Your grandma meant the world to you. She practically raised you after your mum." He trailed off, not wanting to stir more painful memories. "She did," Claire said, her voice cracking. "But she was always different, you know? Mysterious, secretive even. She'd tell me these strange stories about our family, about how we were chosen. I thought it was just her eccentric side showing, but sometimes it felt so real." Mark tilted his head. "Chosen? For what?" Claire shrugged, letting out a shaky laugh. "I don't know. She was obsessed with our family history. Kept a lot of old books and trinkets in her study. She wouldn't even let me in there. I figured it was just her way of holding on to the past." "You two were close," Mark said softly. "And from what I saw, she loved you more than anything." Claire's eyes glistened as she nodded. "She did. She was strict, sure, but she was always there when I needed her. She used to say I reminded her of herself when she was young. That's why this. She motioned to the small wooden box on the coffee table, its brass latch gleaming under the dim light. This feels so heavy. Mark leaned forward, eyeing the box. What's in it? Claire hesitated, her hand hovering over the latch. I don't know. It was in her will. She said it was meant for me and no one else. Mark's eyes narrowed slightly. Didn't you say she was superstitious? Claire let out a dry chuckle. That's putting it mildly. She believed in all kinds of things. Family curses, protective charms, the works. I used to think it was endearing, but now I'm not so sure. Mark's tone softened. It's just a keepsake, Claire. Something to remember her by. Claire sighed deeply, her fingers finally lifting the latch. The box creaked open, revealing a small ornate ring resting on a bed of faded velvet. Its design was intricate, twisting silver vines encircling a deep crimson gem that seemed to pulse faintly in the light. Wow, Mark said, leaning closer. That's beautiful. Did you ever see her wear it? Claire shook her head slowly, her eyes fixed on the ring. It feels familiar. Mark raised an eyebrow. Familiar how? I don't know, Claire said, her voice barely audible. It's like it's calling to me. Mark gave her a skeptical look. You're probably just tired. It's been a long day. Maybe, Claire murmured, though her gaze never left the ring. She reached out and hesitated before picking it up, feeling the cold metal against her skin. A shiver coursed through her as she slipped it onto her finger. Mark watched her, concerned. You okay? Claire nodded, but her voice sounded distant. Yeah, I'm fine. It's just nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Deep within the gem, a faint flicker of light seemed to ignite, unnoticed by either of them, and in that moment, Claire's life began to change forever. Days turned into weeks, and life seemed to settle back into routine for Claire and Mark. Yet, beneath the surface, Claire felt a growing unease. It started with the dreams, vivid, haunting, and primal. In her dreams, she found herself in a dense, moonlit forest. Shadows danced between the trees as she moved with eerie precision, her senses alive with the thrill of the hunt. The sound of her breathing echoed in the stillness, her heart pounding with an unfamiliar rhythm. She was tracking something, but what? She couldn't say. All she knew was the overwhelming need coursing through her veins, an insatiable hunger. Every time she awoke, drenched in sweat, the details of the hunt slipped away, leaving only fragments, the rush of adrenaline, the cool night air, the coppery taste on her tongue. You've been having them again, haven't you? Mark asked one morning as Claire sat at the kitchen table, staring into her untouched cup of coffee. She nodded, her hands trembling slightly. Every night, Mark. It's the same dream. Me running through the woods, chasing something. I can't shake the feeling that it's more than just a dream. Mark leaned against the counter, his brow furrowed. You've been under a lot of stress, Claire. Losing your grandma, dealing with everything afterward. It's bound to take a toll. Grief does strange things to the mind. Claire ran a hand through her hair, her fingers brushing the strands that now seemed duller, darker. Maybe, she murmured, though deep down she wasn't so sure. Meals became an increasingly awkward affair. Claire found herself pushing her plate away more often than not, her appetite waning with each passing day. You're barely eating, Mark said one evening as they sat at the dinner table. You need to take care of yourself. I know, Claire replied, forcing a smile. I'm just not hungry lately. I think it's the dreams. They leave me feeling full, satisfied almost. Mark frowned, but shrugged. Grief can mess with your appetite too. Just don't let it go on too long, okay? As the days grew warmer, Claire began avoiding the sun. She found herself instinctively recoiling from the bright light, her skin tingling as though burned even by brief exposure. "Why the sunglasses?" Mark asked one sunny afternoon as Claire stepped into the backyard, her wide-brimmed hat pulled low over her face. "They help with the glare," Claire replied quickly. "It feels too bright lately. My eyes hurt." Mark laughed lightly. "You're turning into a vampire or something." Claire flinched at his words but forced a chuckle. "Yeah, maybe I am." Her mood began to shift in subtle but unsettling ways. Once patient and even-tempered, Claire found herself snapping at Mark over small things, a misplaced coffee mug, a forgotten errand. "I don't know what's gotten into you," Mark said one evening after a particularly heated argument. "You're not yourself, Claire. You've been different." "I'm sorry," Claire muttered, rubbing her temples. "I don't mean to be like this. I just feel so raw, like my nerves are on edge all the time." Mark softened, pulling her into a hug. "We'll get through this," he whispered. "I'm here for you." Claire closed her eyes, clinging to him, but even as she did, she felt the strange hunger stirring within her, a hunger that no amount of food could sate. Late one night, as Claire lay awake staring at the ceiling, she glanced at the ring still wrapped snugly around her finger. Its crimson gem seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. She couldn't shake the feeling that the ring had something to do with everything she was experiencing. But what could she do? It wasn't like she could just take it off, or maybe she didn't want to. And so the changes continued, subtle yet undeniable, drawing Claire further into the shadows of her new reality. The cool night air wrapped around Claire like a comforting shroud as she stepped out onto the empty city streets. The hum of distant traffic and the occasional bark of a stray dog were the only sounds breaking the stillness. Her thoughts swirled in her mind like a storm, loud and restless, as if they were trying to drown her. Mark had gone to bed hours ago, his patience wearing thin after another tense argument. She couldn't blame him. She'd been unbearable lately. She thought a walk might clear her head, might silence the strange voices that had been whispering at the edges of her consciousness. "Claire." The voice came again, faint but undeniable, like a shadow in her mind. She shook her head, trying to dispel it, but the whispers grew louder as she wandered deeper into the city's darkened streets. Her steps became dreamlike, her surroundings a blur. The streetlights seemed dimmer than usual, casting elongated shadows that moved like living things. Lost in her haze, she barely noticed the three figures stepping out from an alleyway, their faces obscured by hoods. Well, well, what do we have here?" One of them sneered, his voice thick with malice. Claire stopped, her pulse quickening, though not from fear. She turned to face them, her hands tightening into fists. "Looks like an easy target," another muttered. "Hand over your bag, lady, and no one gets hurt." The third man, taller and bulkier than the others, stepped forward and grabbed her arm roughly. "We don't have all night." Something inside Claire snapped. A cold, sharp sensation rippled through her veins, and her vision sharpened. The whispers in her head grew louder, their words unintelligible but commanding. "Let go of me," she said, her voice low and unnervingly calm. The man holding her laughed. "Or what? You gonna—" He didn't finish. Claire moved faster than she thought possible, her hand shooting out to grab his wrist. The sickening crunch of bone breaking echoed in the narrow street as he screamed and fell to the ground, clutching his shattered arm. The other two lunged at her, but Claire spun with inhuman speed. She delivered a kick to one's chest, sending him flying into a nearby dumpster with a thud. The third man swung a knife at her, but she caught his wrist mid-air and twisted it, the blade clattering to the ground. In moments, all three attackers were incapacitated. The man by the dumpster groaned weakly, while the one with the broken wrist tried to crawl away. But Claire didn't care about them. Her eyes locked onto the third man, who now sat on the ground, clutching his face. Blood streamed between his fingers, staining his clothes and the concrete beneath him. Her breath hitched, and a strange primal hunger surged within her. The scent of blood was intoxicating, and the world around her faded into darkness. All she could see was him, his blood, his fear. Her body moved on its own, closing the distance between them. She could hear his heartbeat, fast and frantic, like a drumbeat driving her to madness. "Please," the man whimpered, but his voice was drowned out by the whispers in her head. Claire's teeth ached, her mouth watering as she crouched over him. She was inches away from his bloodied face, her lips parting as the hunger consumed her. "Claire!" A strong hand gripped her shoulder, yanking her back with such force that she stumbled. She turned, snarling, her vision still clouded with bloodlust, and found herself face to face with Mark. "Claire, what the hell are you doing?" he shouted, his voice panicked and full of disbelief. The world snapped back into focus. She looked down at her hands, stained with blood, and then at the terrified man on the ground. Horror washed over her as she staggered back, the whispers in her head fading into silence. I didn't," she stammered, her voice trembling. Mark grabbed her arms, shaking her gently. "We need to go. Now." Without another word, he pulled her away from the scene, the two of them disappearing into the shadows of the night. But Claire knew she couldn't run from what had just happened, or from the darkness growing inside her. Claire paced the living room, her arms crossed tightly, blood still smeared faintly on her clothes. Mark stood near the doorway, his face pale and lined with worry. The tension between them was as thick as the silence that stretched on. "What the hell was that tonight, Claire?" Mark finally broke the silence. "You could have killed those men." "They attacked me," she snapped, her voice sharp, defensive. "What was I supposed to do? Let them hurt me?" Mark's jaw tightened. "That wasn't self-defense. That was something else. Something wrong. You weren't just fighting them. You were enjoying it." Claire stopped, turning to face him, her eyes gleaming unnaturally in the dim light. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I think I do," Mark said, his voice trembling. His gaze dropped to her hand. "It's the ring, Claire. Ever since you put it on, you've been different." Claire's hand instinctively covered the ring, as though shielding it from his words. "The ring has nothing to do with this," she snarled, her voice guttural, almost unrecognizable. "It's mine. I'll never take it off." Mark stepped back, stunned by the ferocity in her tone. "Listen to yourself. You're not acting like you. You're not thinking clearly." "Maybe you're the one who isn't thinking clearly," Claire growled. "The ring is a part of me now. You wouldn't understand." As Mark tried to reason with her, Claire's words faded into the background, and the scene shifted. The year was 1954, and a storm raged outside a quaint countryside cottage. Inside, a woman in her early 30s stood by the fireplace, her fingers brushing over the ornate ring on her hand. Her striking resemblance to Claire was uncanny, though her face bore a haunted, weary expression. "Lillian," her husband said softly, breaking the silence. He was tall, with kind eyes and a voice that carried both concern and authority. "You've been staring at that thing for hours." "What aren't you telling me?" Lillian turned to him, her voice low and strained. "This ring, it was given to me by my grandmother. She told me it's been passed down through generations. A legacy, she called it, but it's not just a family heirloom. It's something much darker." "What do you mean, darker?" he asked, stepping closer. She hesitated, then took a deep breath. "The ring carries the essence of a spirit, a powerful, ancient entity. My grandmother warned me that I'm not strong enough to wear it, that its power would claim me if I did." "Then why keep it?" her husband asked, frowning. "Why not destroy it?" Lillian's eyes darkened, her voice trembling. "Destroying it would release her, and if we were to simply give it away, she would take over the first weak soul she could find. No one would be safe." "Who is she?" her husband asked. His voice hushed. Lillian's gaze bore into him, her voice dropping to a whisper. "She who dwells in the ring, a being so dark, so vile, that even in death she seeks to walk among the living again." Her husband shivered. "Is there no way to end this?" Lillian shook her head. "The spirit feeds on those it claims, growing stronger, but there's a legend that one day someone strong enough will wear the ring and face her, defeat her. Only then will the curse be broken." "And if they fail?" he asked, dread seeping into his voice. "She will walk this earth once more," Lillian said, her voice barely audible. The crackling fire dimmed and shadows deepened in the corners of the room. In the darkest corner, something moved. A figure emerged, barely visible in the flickering light, a decrepit old woman, her skin cracked and flaking, as if held together by dust and rot. Her white hair hung in matted clumps, and her eyes were voids of endless black. The air seemed to freeze as she tilted her head, watching Lillian with an unnatural stillness. A faint, rasping breath escaped her lips, carrying the scent of decay and death. "She waits," Lillian whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "Always watching, always waiting for her chance." The vision faded, and Claire's voice rang out once more, fierce and defiant. "I'm fine, Mark. I don't need your help. I don't need anyone." Mark stared at her, his heart heavy with unease. He knew this wasn't over. Whatever the ring was, whatever it was doing to her, it was only the beginning. Claire drifted into sleep, her body tense, her mind clouded. The moment her eyes closed, she was transported back to her childhood. She was no more than 8 years old, sitting cross-legged on a patchwork quilt in her grandmother's cosy parlour. Sunlight streamed through the lace curtains, casting warm patterns on the wooden floor. Her grandmother, Lillian, sat across from her in a high-backed chair, her hands resting lightly on her lap. The ring glinted faintly on her finger, the crimson stone catching the light as though it had a life of its own. Young Claire tilted her head, her gaze fixed on the ring. "Grandma, why do you always wear that? It looks so heavy." Lillian smiled softly, though there was a shadow in her expression that Claire couldn't quite understand. "This ring, my dear, is more than just jewellery. It's a responsibility." "A responsibility?" Claire asked, wrinkling her nose in confusion. "Yes," Lillian said, leaning forward. "This ring has been passed down through our family for generations. It carries a story, a dangerous one, and it must never fall into the wrong hands." Claire's curiosity piqued, her small hands resting on her knees. "What kind of story?" Lillian reached out and gently took Claire's hands in hers. Her voice grew quieter, as though afraid of being overheard. "It's a story told best in rhyme. Would you like to hear it?" Claire nodded eagerly.
"This crimson stone, so dark, so bright, holds blood of one who shuns the light. A vampire soul within does dwell. Bound by curse, a shadow spell. The wearer gains both strength and speed, yet hungers for a darker need. Beware the whispers in the night, they lead the strong to endless fight. To end her reign, one heart must stand, of iron will and steady hand. The ring must burn in holy flame, to cleanse the world of her cursed name. But know the cost of this brave feat. Your soul shall face her dark deceit, for if you falter weak of heart, the spirit rises whole to start.
Claire listened, enraptured, her young mind struggling to grasp the weight of the words. Who is she, Grandma? The one in the ring? Lillian's smile faded. Her eyes grew distant, her voice heavy with memory. She is the one who wishes to walk among the living again, an ancient vampire, bound to the ring by those who sought to stop her centuries ago, but her essence still lingers, feeding on the weak who wear it. Then why do you wear it? Claire asked, her brow furrowing. Aren't you scared? Lillian hesitated, her gaze dropping to the ring. I wear it because someone must. The ring calls to people, Claire, and if it finds someone unprepared, it will consume them. My grandmother taught me how to resist it, how to keep the spirit at bay. How? Claire whispered, leaning closer. The key is discipline, Lillian said firmly. The spirit preys on those who are vulnerable, those who lack control over their desires, their emotions. I've spent my life learning to quiet my mind, to resist its whispers. It still tries, of course, but I have the strength to say no. Claire looked at her in awe. Does that mean you're stronger than everyone else? Lillian shook her head, a sad smile on her lips. Not stronger, just more prepared. But even I am not immune. The ring waits, always watching, for the moment I falter. That's why it's so important to be ready. Because one day, someone in our family will need to do more than resist. They'll need to end it. Claire's eyes widened. End it? How? Lillian's voice grew even softer, barely a whisper. To destroy the ring is to face her, the vampire spirit inside. Only someone of unbreakable will can stand against her. If they succeed, the curse will be broken. But if they fail... What happens if they fail? Claire asked, her voice trembling. Lillian met her gaze, her eyes filled with quiet sorrow. Then she will rise again, stronger than ever, free to walk this world and spread her darkness. The cosy parlour seemed to grow colder, the shadows in the corners deepening. In the darkest corner, a figure began to emerge, a frail, decrepit old woman, her skin cracked and flaking like dried parchment. Dust and rot clung to her as she moved silently, her hair hanging in matted white strands, her eyes, voids of endless black, fixed on Lillian with an unnatural hunger. Who is she? Claire whispered, clutching her grandmother's hand tightly. She is the one who waits, Lillian replied, her voice shaking, and she will keep waiting until someone strong enough can stop her. Claire awoke with a start, her breathing shallow, her hand instinctively clutching the ring on her finger. The rhyme echoed in her mind, and for the first time she understood the weight of what she was carrying and the danger that came with it. The morning sun filtered weakly through the curtains as Claire sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped tightly around a mug of tea she hadn't touched. Across from her, Mark watched her intently, concern etched into every line of his face. I had another dream, Claire began, her voice unsteady. Mark raised an eyebrow. The same as before? The forest. No, she said, shaking her head. This was different. I was a child again, sitting with my grandmother. She taught me a rhyme about the ring. She said it holds the soul of a vampire, and that only someone strong enough can face her and end the curse. Mark leaned forward, his expression serious. Do you remember the rhyme? Claire nodded and recited it, her voice trembling. This crimson stone so dark, so bright, holds blood of one who shuns the light. A vampire's soul within does dwell, bound by curse, a shadow's spell. The wearer gains both strength and speed, yet hungers for a darker need. Beware the whispers in the night, they lead the strong to endless fight. To end her reign, one heart must stand, of iron will and steady hand. The ring must burn in holy flame, to cleanse the world of her cursed name. But know the cost of this brave feat, your soul shall face her dark deceit. For if you falter, weak of heart, the spirit rises, whole to start. Mark rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Holy flame. It's clear we need fire, but this isn't just about throwing the ring into a bonfire, is it? No, Claire said. Grandma said that the spirit feeds on weakness. If I'm not strong enough, she'll use me to return. But I think if we can confront her, distract her long enough, we can destroy her. How do we even prepare for something like that? Mark asked, his tone edged with disbelief. Claire's gaze was steely. We follow the rhyme. We burn it in a fire, but not just any fire, a consecrated one, and we need to create a space where she can't escape if things go wrong. The next 2 days were spent in frantic preparation. Mark researched rituals of purification, gathering salt, candles, and holy water. Claire retrieved an old journal of her grandmother's, detailing ceremonies for binding and banishment. They chose the basement for the ritual, clearing the space and marking a circle on the floor with salt. Candles were placed at the cardinal points, their wicks steeped in holy oil. In the centre, they built a small pyre using consecrated wood. The night of the ceremony, Claire and Mark stood at the edge of the circle, their faces lit by the flickering flames of the candles. Claire held the ring in her hand, its crimson gem pulsing faintly as if it were alive. "Are you ready?" Mark asked, his voice low. "As ready as I'll ever be," Claire replied, stepping into the circle. Claire placed the ring on the pyre and lit it with a trembling hand. The flames roared to life, unnatural and fierce, casting shadows that danced around the room. The air grew heavy, the scent of burning metal filling their lungs. Suddenly, the fire twisted, and a figure began to emerge within the flames. It was the spirit, a decrepit old woman, her skin cracked and flaking, her black eyes glistening with malice. Dust and rot clung to her, her laughter echoing like a death rattle. "You fools," she rasped, her voice filled with cruel amusement. "Did you think you could destroy me? You've only freed me from my prison." Claire stepped back, her heart pounding as the spirit began to rise, her form solidifying. "I am older than your gods, stronger than your flames," the spirit sneered, "and now, thanks to you, I shall walk this world again." Mark shouted from outside the circle. "Claire, now, the final part." Claire's hand shook as she retrieved the small vial of holy water from her pocket. She hurled it into the flames, the liquid exploding into a brilliant white light. The spirit screamed, her form twisting and writhing as the fire turned blindingly bright. Claire recited the words from her grandmother's journal, her voice steady despite the terror gripping her heart. "Bound by curse, your reign shall end. In holy light, your soul I rend. No longer bound by crimson stone, your shadow fades. You're now alone." The spirit's screams grew louder, her body disintegrating into ash. For a moment, it seemed as if she would escape, her black eyes locking onto Claire. "You think you've won," the spirit hissed. "You'll never be rid of me. I am eternal." Before she could finish, the light consumed her entirely, leaving nothing but silence. Claire collapsed to her knees, the room falling still. The ring lay in the ashes of the pyre, its gem dull and lifeless. Mark rushed to her side, pulling her into his arms. "It's over," he said softly. Claire nodded, tears streaming down her face. "It's over." But deep in her heart, she couldn't shake the feeling that the spirit's final words were more than a threat. They were a promise. The living room was bathed in the soft glow of a single lamp. Mark sat slumped on the sofa, his head resting against the cushion, his body finally relaxed for the first time in days. The faint sound of a late-night show played on the television, but he wasn't paying attention. His thoughts were elsewhere, replaying the horrors they had faced. "We're going to be all right now, Claire," he shouted toward the kitchen, a small smile breaking across his face. Relief swept over him like a wave. "It's over. We're finally free." The air grew still, unnaturally so, and the light in the room flickered. Mark's smile faltered as a cold wind began to seep through the house, carrying with it the faint scent of decay. "Claire," he called again, his voice tinged with unease. Suddenly, the doors slammed shut with deafening force, the locks clicking into place one by one. The windows rattled as if struck by a violent gale, though the air outside was calm. Mark shot to his feet, his heart pounding. "Claire!" he shouted, panic creeping into his voice. The wind intensified, swirling wildly around the room. Objects lifted off shelves and hurled through the air. Picture frames shattered, books thudded against the walls, and the lamp crashed to the floor. Mark shielded himself with his arms, stumbling back as the wind seemed to push against him, pinning him against the sofa. The kitchen door creaked open, and a shadowed figure stepped through. It was Claire, but something was different. Her movements were slow and deliberate, her posture unnaturally straight. The glow of the crimson gem on the ring cast an eerie light across her face, and her eyes. They were black, endless voids that seemed to swallow the room's light. "Claire," Mark whispered, his voice trembling. She tilted her head, a twisted smile curling on her lips. "Claire? No, my dear, she's not here anymore." Her voice was cold, hollow, and laced with cruel amusement. Mark's breath hitched. "What are you talking about?" "You denied me my legacy," she hissed, stepping closer, the air around her crackling with energy. "You destroyed my vessel, my ring, and for that I had to make other arrangements." She gestured to her body, the smile widening. "I have taken this one instead." Mark's legs gave out, and he stumbled backward, his back pressing against the sofa. No, this isn't possible. We destroyed you." The spirit laughed, a guttural, chilling sound that echoed through the room. "You destroyed the ring, yes, but not me. I needed only a moment to find another, and this body is strong, perfect for my return." She leaned closer, her black eyes locking onto his. "I will walk in your world once again." With a wave of her hand, an invisible force knocked Mark to the ground, pinning him flat. He struggled, but it was useless. "Claire, if you're still in there, fight her, please," he begged, his voice breaking. The spirit sneered. "Claire is gone, but don't worry. She won't be alone for long." She crouched over Mark, her lips parting to reveal elongated, razor-sharp teeth. Mark screamed as she lunged forward, sinking her fangs into his neck. The sound of tearing flesh and his muffled cries filled the room, quickly fading as his body went limp. The house fell silent once more, the wind dying as quickly as it had risen. The doors unlocked themselves with soft clicks, and the air grew still. The figure that had once been Claire rose gracefully to her feet, her skin now pale and radiant, her eyes glowing faintly crimson. She ran her hands down her sides, relishing the vitality of her new body. Stepping over Mark's lifeless form, she moved towards the door. With every step, Her movements grew more fluid, more confident. She opened the front door, inhaling deeply as the cool night air greeted her. Outside, the world was quiet, the streets empty. She took a single step into the night, spreading her arms wide as a triumphant smile lit her face. "Life," she whispered, her voice filled with dark delight. She took another step, then another, her voice rising with every word. "Life, life." Her laughter echoed through the streets as she disappeared into the shadows, leaving only silence and death in her wake. And so, the spirit of the ring walked among the living once again.